What does that Jared Goff contract mean for the Lions financially and in the long haul? We asked Sam Monson from PFF.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And here we go, everybody. It is a Tuesday edition of Locked On Lions right here, Locked On Podcast Network. It is indeed your team every day. And a Tuesday, May 14th and a Wednesday, May 15th. Tomorrow night, we'll do an evening show following the schedule release. Thanks for making us your first listen today and checking us out wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Lions today, brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Looking for tickets to anything? Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Big story remains Jared Goff's brand spanking new $53 million per year contract on a 4-year deal with the Lions. Sam Monson's with us from Pro Football Focus to discuss today. Of course, check out Sam on Twitter at PFF_Sam. Listen to him as he co-hosts the PFF NFL pod as well. Sam, great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
What'd you think, my friend, when this hit yesterday? Jared Goff going to be the second highest paid quarterback in the league. Surprise? Not at all. You and I have talked before about that number with a 5 in front of it, and Jared got it.
Yeah, I guess it kind of answers that question of, were they going to try and find any wiggle room or creativity or some form of mid-tier quarterback contract rather than just give him the top of the market contract? And the answer is obviously no. I mean, he slots in right behind Joe Burrow as essentially the second best paid quarterback in the NFL. They have given Jared Goff a top of the market contract and said, he is our guy. He is capable of the kind of play we need him to have, and resoundingly answered that question.
What do you think in terms of, because you look at everything, you look at the numbers, you're watching these games, but was it an overpay? Was it right? Is he slotted where he should be? Is it just timing? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it's complicated, right? We try and treat these things as a black and white enterprise. It's either good or it's bad, and it's always somewhere in the middle. I mean, we had this conversation on our podcast previously. Like, the problem is, even independent of the money, we can't even agree on what a quarterback is, right? Obviously, we know Mahomes is fantastic, and we know, other quarterbacks lower down are not really viable starters, but there's a whole bunch of guys in the middle that we can't even agree in abstract terms what he is, right? Is he top 5? Is he top 10? Is he top 15? And if you take away a receiver or if you add a coach here or there, and Jared Goff is a perfect example of that, right? He has been a disaster right out of the gate for the Rams. And then Sean McVay comes in, rebuilds his career, and suddenly he looks amazing. And then Sean McVay himself decided, you know what? I can't do it with this guy. I need to go in a different direction. And he becomes effectively a make weight in a contract or in a trade for Matthew Stafford, a guy that they decided was good enough and proved correct to take them to a Super Bowl. And then in Detroit, Goff rebuilds his career again. And under Ben Johnson, now he has a couple of great seasons. Last year, probably a career year for him. And even within that career year, there was a stretch in the middle of the season where the wheels almost fell off entirely, right? There was like a 3 or 4 game stretch where he had 3 or 4 bad games almost consecutively. And if you take those away, Jared Goff had like an all-pro caliber season.
Sure.
So we're in this world where I don't think anyone has a great handle on how good Jared Goff is completely in a vacuum. You take him out of that team, dropped him in another team, what would it look like? I don't think anybody has a good answer to that question. But what we do know is that within the Lions offense, with Ben Johnson calling plays, all of which is going to be the case, next year, Jared Goff is capable of extremely high level play. And okay, there may be a couple of games where it goes south, but he's capable of the kind of all pro level play they need from him, and that justifies that kind of contract. So I think you can say if he repeats that kind of year, if he's able to back that up, and as long as the current situation is what he's dealing with, he's probably worth a top of the market money deal, particularly when you factor in just the way the economics of the whole thing work, right? Whoever's the last guy to sign is going to have the best deal. So in that kind of world, I think it's a fair deal for Jared Goff. Now, I think the questions arise, like what happens if Ben Johnson is eventually tempted away by a head coaching gig somewhere? What happens if you start to pull at the threads and take pieces away from the things that are helping Jared Goff be successful right now? Can he still be at that level? Can he still raise the game of other guys to that kind of level? And I think that is an open question that we don't know the answer to yet.
I've listened to you and Steve on the pod last couple of years. 1 minute it's Dak Prescott, best quarterback in the NFC. 1 minute it's Jalen Hurts. Even last year, there were some people talking about Jordan Love and the Jared Goff on a roll right now. It's not like the AFC, right? So maybe that played a role in where Detroit kind of sits in helping them get this kind of deal. Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's that. There's the fact that it's inconsistent, and this is not a constant thing for any of these guys, right? Outside of, Patrick Mahomes is amazing and maybe one or two other guys, everyone else is going to have purple patches. They're going to have times where they look great, where they don't look great. And it changes. So you're sort of dealing with this inconsistent roller coaster of performance anyway. And then I think the other thing is that the last few years have really shown us how important that supporting cast is to pretty much every quarterback outside of guys like Mahomes. The Chiefs traded away arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL, and Patrick Mahomes is able to win a Super Bowl with a group of guys letting him down almost consistently throughout the entire season. Most quarterbacks are not able to do that, and you end up with situations where if they don't have the coach, if they don't have the offensive line, if they don't have the receivers, they're just not set up to function, let alone succeed. So I think that's one of the elements here, is that teams are acutely aware that you need a viable environment around these guys for them to show their best play. And you also are going to need that if they're not Patrick Mahomes, and you need to somehow offset the difference between Kirk Cousins or Jared Goff or Dak Prescott or any of these other guys and Patrick Mahomes, or, quarterbacks at that level who are genuinely capable of just making magic happen almost by themselves. So yeah, I think it's a difficult landscape for teams to navigate if they have a good, not great quarterback.
Talking to Sam Monson from Pro Football Focus. Shout out to Ann Arbor's own Dave Solfaro, Diamond Dave Solfaro, for setting this up. We love talking to Sam. Real fast, you and I were talking off air about this, but there are people, Sam, there are fans that are either on social media or calling into talk shows. They can't believe. Even some of my YouTube commenters, what about Hendon Hooker? I'm like, what about him? I can't believe this is an argument right now. Yeah, he could be fun to watch in August, and if Goff gets hurt, he could do some things, but I can't believe there's actual people that are pining for a guy that's never taken an NFL snap over a guy who just took the Detroit Lions to 30 minutes from a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, Hendon Hooker is like a lottery ticket now, right? You've bought a lottery ticket on something, and somewhere down the line, you're going to find out if you got the winning ticket or if he's just, you just burned some money. And it's not a huge investment, so it's fine. But you can't treat that as if it's something that's going to come good. You can't put any stock in Hendon Hooker and plan the future of the franchise around the fact that this guy exists on the roster. He's, if he works out, if Hendon Hooker works out down the line, great. You've got an asset, you've got some options now. Maybe you can move in a different direction. Maybe it happens at exactly the time where Jared Goff's career comes back down again. And we see what already happened to him with the Rams happen. And suddenly the Lions have got buyer's remorse a bit, and they wish they had a different option. Maybe that's when a Hendon Hooker comes good. Or, he becomes a trade asset in his own right, and you can flip him for something else or for draft picks down the line. But you can't possibly plan for that right now. Like, Hendon Hooker was a wildly raw prospect coming off a significant injury, and we've seen effectively nothing from him because of all those things. And the fact that, he wasn't going to have a role last year. Jared Goff was the guy. So I get, it's worth raising the point that, hey, Hendon Hooker is sitting here on the roster and he could be something down the line, and at least factoring that into, the whole picture. But there's no way that the Lions or anybody else should be looking at Hendon Hooker and saying this should change the way we're behaving with Jared Goff. Like, he is there simply because if he pays out down the line, it's a huge benefit to them. But it's a lottery ticket.
I want to ask Sam, coming back next, who's next to get this kind of big money deal? We'll talk about what this means for the Lions financially and certainly the commitment that they've made. And yes, we got to ask Sam about Peter Bukowski and Locked On Packers, who says the Packers have a better roster than the Lions. We'll ask Sam all about that coming up next. But first, as I mentioned before, Locked On Lions brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Looking for getting last-minute tickets? Maybe you're heading out of town. Oh, I'll be in town the night of Cavs Celtics tomorrow night or something like that. You want last-minute tickets? You're really not sure where to turn. That's where you turn to Gametime. They take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets, NBA tickets, and Major League Baseball. Remember, we got schedule release coming out tomorrow. Big games. That includes the Rams and Matthew Stafford coming to town. We know what that Lions-Packers game is going to look like at Ford Field. Thanksgiving could be the Bills. I've heard rumors about that. You want to get the tickets to that game or any of these games, you can do so at Gametime. All right. Use the app, customize your spot, and the supplemental as inspiration. It's just awesome how you can just customize it. So you're in Detroit. You can get Lions, Wings, Tigers, Pistons tickets whenever you need. Last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, all there for you. And that view from your seat is fantastic, where you can swerve right, left. You know exactly where you're sitting and what that view looks like before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Always love talking to Sam Monson from Pro Football Focus and the PFF NFL pod as well. All right, Sam, so who is next? Is it going to be Tua? Is it going to be Dak that gets this kind of money? And are they going to go, someone going to be making $60 million a year as a quarterback in the next year or two?
Yeah, obviously those are the two big dominoes that are next to fall. I'm not sure in which order they come, but this only raised the price tag on both those guys, and this is the peril of waiting or negotiating or trying to win that negotiation with your quarterback. Is the longer you wait, someone else is going to get a deal done, and those contracts only go upwards. And Dallas already experienced this. I mean, this is what they did the last time with Dak Prescott. They stretched it out as long as humanly possible, and the number just kept getting higher and higher. And actually, the structure of the deal got worse from their point of view as well in terms of the Cowboys. And that's part of what they're struggling with now, is that they were in a tough spot just with the very structure of the Dak Prescott contract. So I think for that reason, maybe the Tua deal gets done first, because it should be easier to do. It should be a more simple contract to construct. And, it's his first big payday. And I think, the Dolphins feel similarly about Tua that the Lions do with Goff, that we're not 100% sure what he is in abstract terms. If we plucked him out of this roster, put him in a different one, but functionally we don't care, because in this system with these guys to throw to, with what we're doing, he's a perfect fit. So I think Tua will get done. And then the Dak Prescott thing is going to be the challenge, because that's the deal that is going to be pushing $60 million a year because of the leverage that Prescott has.
Lions just spent $444 million total on Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jared Goff. What do you think about that? And what does that say about the commitment of Sheila Hamp and this ownership, which, as you know, for decades was not getting stuff like that done?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a serious financial commitment to those players, but those are exactly the players you would want to lock up long term. You get your quarterback, you get your best receiver, and you get your franchise tackle. Those are like every NFL team, when they're constructing things and they're saying, this is our salary cap, we have enough money for 4 or 5 really top of the market deals on the roster, out of our 53 53-man roster. If you were cherry picking which positions you wanted to invest that money in, this would be 3 of the 5, right? Your quarterback, your wide receiver, your franchise tackle, and then the next 2 you would pick out would be cornerback, your number one shutdown corner, and your best pass rusher, your best defensive lineman. So, the Lions have been investing in these spots. They've been finding the right players at the right positions, and now they're locking them down long term, and they're investing, they're committing the big money and the big deals to the right players. So I think it's just another example of a team that over the last couple of years has been as well run as any franchise in football.
How about that? You never think about that, Sam, that it would actually be the Detroit Lions. And shout out to guys like Goff, and we mentioned St. Brown, Sewell, some of the free agents that they've signed. You and I talked months ago about DJ Reader, but they want to be here. That's a culture that's been set of winning, and now guys aren't bolting; they're staying put here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Lions have become a destination now. They are a team on the rise. They are talking and they understand that they are trying to do this the right way and build long-term success, not just, throw everything at 1 year. Even coming out of the NFC Championship game last year, some of the first words out of Dan Campbell's mouth were how hard it is to get back here and how they want to do this, a long-term thing. And they're not just going to let's go sign two massive names to try and get over that hump. They want to build this thing out so that they're competing every single year, whether or not they win a championship at the end of it. And that's the kind of thing that excites players. You want to go somewhere where they're going to be at the business end of the season every single year. They're not just a team that's got a 2-year window and then it's gone. This is a team that wants to be there every year.
What about in terms of the money and how it affects? All right, I mean, they've got to re-up Lee McNeil. They've got to re-up Taylor Decker. Those guys are up after this year. Do these contracts affect that in your mind? You can't keep everybody. Obviously, they let Jonah Jackson walk. He got 17 mil plus from the Rams, but how do you view that?
Yeah, so it definitely affects it. I mean, when we said you've probably got 5 of those top of the market money deals to give out on your roster, you're going to have another sort of 5 of the next wave down, the next tier of free agent or of just contracts to hand out. But there's only so much money to go around. And you do, in particular, when one of those contracts is the quarterback at the top of the market, you reach a point where you have to make some tough financial decisions. And you say, look, we would love to have this guy around, but we're going to have to go in a different direction. We're going to have to try and go younger and cheaper and replace them and hope that we're good enough at doing that we can keep that cycle going. And Taylor Decker, I think, is a perfect example of that. Lim McNeil might be one of those guys that you want to keep around anyway. And, he might be the next one up on that list, right? We talked about the next positions that you want to fill. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson sort of on the horizon there would be the next guy that you want to tie down as well. But McNeil might be one of those players that you want to keep on a big money contract as well. But a guy like Taylor Decker reaching the end of his career, he's a perfect example of, I'm sure the Lions would love to keep him, but financially you might have to, the correct thing, that the smart move might be to say, good luck to you, right? We're going to let you go get the money somewhere else. We can't, it doesn't make sense for us to give you that money. We need to invest it somewhere else. So yeah, I think the sort of overriding the effect of the Jared Goff contract in particular is it just gets harder now, right? We just notch up the difficulty level because you're going to have that constant squeeze now on the salary cap, and you're going to have to make some of those decisions and ultimately walk away from some players.
What about the draft? I want to get your thoughts on what Detroit did, getting those 2 corners early. I'm sure no one thought putting 2-round mocks together that you'd get Arnold and Rakestraw both in Detroit. What were your impressions of what Brad Holmes did?
Yeah, I mean, number one, double dipping sort of with those first 2 picks on corner in and of itself would be something that nobody does in a mock draft, right? That's, if you put that in a mock draft, you would have people saying there's no way that happens. That's ridiculous. And yet these things happen every single year. And then Terran Arnold just himself, I think, is a player that Detroit probably never thought they had an opportunity at. He was the consensus number 1 or number 2 corner, depending on where you look. He was the top of a lot of boards and a guy people thought would be gone in the top half of the first round and could easily be a top 10 player. And because of the way the entire draft unfolded, with basically the entire first half of the first round being offensive players, corners in particular were the players that started to get pushed really far down that first round. And to the benefit of teams like Detroit, like Philadelphia, these teams that came out of that first round with a corner they probably never thought they had a shot at. So I think you could see how much Detroit liked him by the fact that they were willing to go up and trade. I think the Lions doing what they did for Arnold and the Vikings doing what they did for Dallas Turner, I think were similar moves in terms of, I doubt that either team pictured a scenario on draft night where they thought they had any shot at those guys. But as soon as they started to slide and got within range, they were like, we have to go make this happen. We're talking about, I would imagine the Lions had Arnold as the best corner on the board. Not on the board, in the draft. And I imagine the same thing is true for Minnesota, that they had
On their
Dallas
board,
Turner as the best edge rusher in this draft. And suddenly they found themselves within striking distance of one of those guys, deep into that first round, and took their opportunity to go and make it happen.
Some final things with Sam. I want to ask him about the Green Bay rivalry and what these two rosters look like now as we've been through free agency and the draft. We'll do that next. But first, let's tell you about FanDuel, folks. You want to get in on the action? We got NBA playoffs, NHL, Tigers playing tonight against the Marlins. If you've got a certain cable company, you can't watch it, but you can bet on it with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Knicks Pacers tonight, 8 o'clock. Late night with some Nuggets action. Check it all out. NBA playoffs, NHL. You want to put some money down on it? You can at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. By the way, Sam, we know this. The Lions will not be playing on Thursday night or Monday night to start the year. Chiefs, Ravens to open the season on Thursday Night Football. Niners, Jets, the first Monday night game of the year. You knew you'd get Aaron Rodgers on Monday night, right? That was a no-brainer, right, for the TV people.
Yeah, hopefully it lasts a little bit longer than it did the last time.
I teed you up for that one. Tell me about so Peter Bukowski hosts Locked On Packers. I don't know if you've been on his show before. Pete's a good man, but he's a little out of his mind. He said the other day, "Oh yeah, Packer roster's better than the Lions. Take the bet that the Lions over-under is 10.5 at FanDuel, 9.5 for Green Bay." Says, "Oh yeah, make some money on it." What are your thoughts? Green Bay had a good draft. Don't get me wrong, but here's Pete telling me on the show on Friday here, "Oh, Packers are a better offensive line." I said, "No, they don't. The Lions' offensive line, go to PFF, is number 2. Packers is 11. Oh, but it's pass blocking EPA or something." He was, but he thinks the Packer tight ends are better. I said, wait a minute. Sam Laporta is a top 3 tight end. He likes Love over Goff. The floor is yours. Is Peter crazy, or is this Green Bay roster just getting right there, maybe equal to Detroit's?
Well, it could be. I think that's the thing, right? Is they had the youngest roster in the NFL last season. I think they're going to have the youngest roster in the NFL again this season. And if they all take a step forward together, in this offseason, I mean, they finished last year on fire. Jordan Love was playing incredible football. That team was playing really well. And, they kind of made a mess of it right at the end of the postseason, but they were improving leaps and bounds. And if you look at that and you continue the line right on the graph and you plot it out another year, the Packers will be one of the best teams in the NFL this season if it continues that way. The thing is, it doesn't happen that way, right? And very rarely do you see teams just continue this linear progression in either direction year to year. There's too much roster turnover for that to be a reality. And players don't progress that way. Like sometimes they do, but sometimes they'll have a good year and then a bad year. And then it's not, it doesn't always go in a nice, neat curve. So I think when you look in particular, anyone with a Packers bias is going to look at that team and say, it was so young, it was playing so well. And if they all just keep going the way they're going, why wouldn't we be one of the best rosters in the NFL? But I think that's just not the way that it works in today's NFL. So I expect them to be a good team. I expect a good portion of those players to take a step forward and develop and get better. But I don't think that all of them will. And ultimately, there's just too much proven talent on Detroit's team and on their roster for me to say that Green Bay's potential is enough to put you above them right now. I think I would say the Lions have the best roster in this division. And the Packers could overtake them if everything goes their way, but I don't expect it to.
How close is Chicago in your mind?
I mean, a lot closer than they were. Yeah, a lot closer than they were, before the offseason happened. I think they've done a really good job this offseason. Obviously, Caleb Williams has the potential to transform everything there. I mean, the bar is not set high for Chicago Bears quarterbacks, for the franchise's history. I mean, the rookie record there is 11. And Caleb Williams over under, I think, is 22 or 23 or something. The team record is 29. Like, they've never had a quarterback pass for over 30 touchdowns. And Caleb Williams could easily achieve that year one. And unlike Justin Fields, the last hope they had at the position, they've done a really good job of giving Caleb Williams the support system to actually succeed. I mean, he has DJ Moore, which obviously was connected to the Justin Fields thing, but they had Keenan Allen. They were able to trade a 4th round pick, I think it was, for him to pick up his contract because they built up that kind of resource, and then get Rome Odunze with that 2nd first-round pick. I mean, that is now a phenomenal collection of a phenomenal wide receiver trio, but also Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift out of the backfield. I mean, they have some real weaponry to work with. And I think if Caleb Williams plays a little bit more within structure than Justin Fields did, the offensive line will look a lot better than it did as well. So I think the Bears have done a really nice job on offense, making that side of the ball very good. And then their defense is a little bit like Green Bay's roster, where I think they're relying on that group taking a step forward together and developing and growing. There's a lot of young talent there. They add a player like Kevin Byard in free agency, that'll help. But I think generally they're sort of relying on the defense growing and developing as a group of young players, whereas the offense, they've gone out and added some pieces and brought in some real players to propel that group forward.
Always love talking to you, Sam. Thanks so much.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Sam Monson with us, Pro Football Focus. Follow him on Twitter at PFF_Sam. Check out the pod as well with him and Steve Palazzolo. This has been a Tuesday Locked On Lions. Don't forget, tomorrow night, schedule release party.